All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Kabbalah Café. This is best way to get the week started. Best way to get the week started with a little mystical jolt of inspiration, a little bit of spiritual energy, a little bit of spiritual context and purpose and mission to kind of set the agenda for the week. So this week we have the good fortune of being able to start a brand new text. The book is called Creation and Redemption, and I have the book right here. So for those of you that wish to purchase the book, I think it should be available online. I didn't check super recently if it's available. You can see the book. And also if you have a copy of the book, because I printed out a bunch of copies for the folks around the table over here. So we see over here, it says translation and annotation by Rabbi Yosef Marcus with additional annotation by yours truly, Rabbi Ari Sollish. So if you want to buy one of my books and study together over the next several months, you can get this one. It is called Creation and Redemption, studying the mystical discourse HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem Taf Shin from 1940. So I want to begin with a little bit of historical context that kind of shapes the narrative of what we're about to learn. Because we could just jump into the learning, but I feel like let's give a little bit of the historical piece to it. So it's the year 1940, and it's the spring of 1940. In fact, 88 years ago and 10 days. The 9th of Adar, 1940. Today is the 19th of Adar. So 10 days ago and 88 years, something very special happened. And I am going to read from the introduction of this book. I'm going to read something. You don't have it printed out here, and I don't have it online either. So I'm going to read from the introduction of the book. Tuesday, 19th of March, 1940. What day of March it is? Oh, it's March 8th. Okay. The Swedish liner Drottningholm sits docked at the New York harbor. On board, among the other 800 or so passengers, sits a 60-year-old man in a wheelchair. He is approached by the captain and asked whether he would prefer to be first or last to embark. No breakfast?
No, there is. Yeah, there is.
Okay. He chooses the latter. His name is Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneersohn, and he is the 6th Rebbe of the Chabad Lubavitcher dynasty. It is the second time he has come to the United States of America. The first time in 1929, he had come to visit. This time he has come to stay. He sees his migration to the Western Hemisphere as fulfilling a divine dictate to bring Judaism and Hasidism to American soil, a soil that has until now proved inhospitable to the survival of Judaism. Even his supporters are skeptical. Not here, they say kindly, not in America. America is different. But the Rebbe, who has stood down the communists and escaped the Nazis, is not easily daunted, not even by sophisticates with top hats, bow ties, and patronizing smiles. There are some Jews living in America who are righteous, but they are completely apathetic to the spiritual malady plaguing their country and content instead to lead their lives undisturbed. The Rebbe has no such intentions. He is not about to ignore his surroundings. He plans to light a spiritual fire, one luminous enough to bring light to the entire world. America is not different, he declares. America is nit anders. Not that he is oblivious to the challenge. Even among his own Hasidim, he sees a troubling shift. In his diary, he writes about contemplating the vast difference between Lubavitch, meaning back home in Russia, and Lubavitch in New York. He describes the rich spiritual life of the olden days and the focus on spiritual matters. And now what? This is a direct quote, translated into English. Lubavitch of New York, it is difficult for me to write of this, for my heart is greatly pained. The pain of his heart notwithstanding, back to the introduction, the Rebbe immediately begins to act. He sees that while the American Jews have built beautiful synagogues, they have failed to build Jewish schools. By 1942, several Jewish day schools under his direction dot the country. He opens a publishing house that produces authentically Jewish educational materials in English, an uncommon phenomenon at the time. Despite being a brilliant Torah scholar and a profound mystic, he is involved in such non-glorious activities as ensuring that Jewish children be able to recognize an aleph and a bet. Yet he sees himself primarily as a teacher of Hasidism. That's mysticism. In late summer 1939, he commented to Rabbi Yisrael Jacobson the following, quote, "Those who were active in the movement to arrange my moving to America after my first visit there considered it as a community undertaking, i.e. that I come as a leader of Jewry. But that is not my exclusive work, although I have been successful at it. A special concern of mine is Hasidim and Hasidus. Less than a month after his arrival, the Rebbe had already authored 3 profound Hasidic discourses, one of which is the present discourse, which we have titled Creation and Redemption." So that's a little bit of the introduction, from the introduction, which is very long, it's about 20 pages, introduction to this book about the context of this discourse. So it was basically authored in 1940, in the spring of 1940. In fact, the title is HaChodesh Hazeh. This coming Shabbat is Shabbat HaChodesh, Parshat HaChodesh. We read a special additional reading. We pull out a second Torah scroll, and we read a special reading that talks about Rosh Chodesh and the first month, and how the month of Nisan is the first of the months of the year, which we will speak about as we get into the discourse. But here's how I want to frame this. As you saw, as I read in the introduction, there was a feeling that America was very different. There were many Jews that when they came over from the old country, even though they had been religious, they had been observant, but there were many Jews that unfortunately took their tefillin, the tefillin, and threw them overboard, threw them into the ocean as they crossed the Atlantic. Why? Good morning. Why did they throw their tefillin overboard? Because they felt like they're leaving the past behind. There's a lot of, as I'm sure we all know, right? There's a lot of Jewish blood that is soaked in the earth in Europe, right? Europe, for centuries, had policies of expulsion or forced conversion or just otherwise pogroms, and all sorts of terrible things happen on the shore, on the soil of Europe. And so many Jews, when leaving the old country, and they called it the old country, and there was a reason why they called it the old country. It's not just because it's the former country, but the old country meaning old-fashioned. That's the old place where we get persecuted for being Jews. Now we're going to the land of opportunity, to the United States of America, where we can be brand new, reinvent ourselves as Americans. And again, many Jews left or decided at that point to leave their tradition behind. And the previous Rebbe, who came over in 1940, in the middle of World War II, so just a little bit of a note about him. So he grew up and kind of began his leadership of Chabad as a 6th Rebbe in Russia, in the city of Lubavitch, which is in Belarus, in White Russia. Eventually, in 1929, he got kicked out of Russia because they wanted to kill him. And he was arrested and sentenced for execution. Why? Because of his activities in Judaism, and the communists didn't like it. So eventually, they decided, instead of killing him, they're going to basically say, you have to leave. There's a lot of international pressure and a lot of whatever it was. They basically kicked him out of the country. He went to Riga, Latvia. He went to Warsaw, Poland, different places. And eventually, moved to the United States of America. And he made it his mission. He made it his mission to ensure that America is not different. America is nicht anders. Right? Good. I knew you would. Right? America is nicht anders. America is not different. Why is it not different? It's not different because, hold on one second. It's not different because if Judaism is real and if Judaism is true, then it's real and true wherever you are. Not only in a space where there's ghetto walls. By the way, what's interesting about European Jewry and the way the communities were structured, many communities were structured, is that it wasn't easy to leave the community. We always think of it, as kind of, Jews being trying to force the Judaism out of Jews. There was some of that, but there was also something else. Jews weren't really accepted in the larger society, right? The ghetto walls are put to keep the Jews separate. Keep the Jews, stay in your lane. Stay amongst your fellows. And so to leave the community and become, a broader member of society was a very difficult step. And now in America, a democratic country, you be whoever you want, practice whatever faith you want. But of course, that comes with sometimes even greater challenge. And so again, many Jews coming over to America said, America is different. We're no longer being persecuted. We're no longer being targeted. We're no longer being shoved into a space with a wall, whether literal or figurative, around it to keep us, in line, in check, in a certain lane. We can be whoever we want to be. We can be as we can be as American as we want to be, and therefore they abandoned their religion. The previous Rebbe's motto was, America's the Shadrish, America's not different, meaning if Judaism is real, if Judaism is true, it's real and true in the United States of America. It's true wherever we are. Have Torah, we'll travel, even in America. And by the way, the introduction spoke about like the first Jewish day schools within the Chabad network popping up in the 1940s. My grandfather, a blessed memory. Sorry?
Was in New York.
So actually the first ones that he established were in the Northeast. So my grandfather was born in 1922 and he was born in Manhattan, but he grew up in Brownsville, which is, it's like near Crown Heights in Brooklyn. And when the previous Rebbe came off the boat, literally off the boat, as we read in 1940, my grandfather was there. He did not grow up Chabad. He grew up, Jewish and religious and whatever, but he didn't grow up Chabad. There was not really Chabad up until that point in the United States. There were some that had come over, but there wasn't a solid presence. He was so enamored by the previous Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneersohn, and if you want to know what he looked like, there's a nice black and white picture. You don't have it. I have it in my book over here. Where is it? Serious looking, right?
Looks like a rabbi.
Looks like a rabbi. He wore a spaduk. He wore a fur hat. Our Rebbe switched it to fedora. Why? Because I don't know. Now we're gangsters. I don't know. Kidding. Just ask what's
Welcome to America.
Welcome to America. Yeah, no, he modernized a little bit of the look, but
He became American.
he became an American citizen. Yeah, for sure. Became an American citizen very proudly. They came to him. I don't know how many people they do that for, but the immigration or whatever it is, whoever, they came to him. He stared down, as the introduction, he stared down the communists. He didn't blink. They pulled a gun, 1929, they put a gun to his head. And they said, you need to speak to tell your entire network, divulge, because there was an underground network of Jewish activities in Russia, communist Russia, that he had developed to keep Judaism alive, even under the intense, communist pressure. They said, reveal. He wouldn't talk. He wouldn't even talk to them in Russian. He knew Russian fluently. He would only speak to them in Yiddish. Just to not break. He said when they pulled the gun, the guy said, the interrogators pulled out a pistol, a revolver. He said, this makes many people speak. He says, this only works for people that have multiple gods in one world. I have one God and two worlds. Meaning, I'm not scared. I'm not scared. There's an afterlife. There's one God, and he was an incredibly strong. But when he came to America, he made it a campaign to teach and to educate. And so back to my grandfather, just anecdotally. So he had the opportunity to meet. So when the Rebbe came, so again, he was in New York then, and he was at the dock. A lot of people came out. It was a huge. The Lubavitcher Rebbe coming to America was a huge deal. So many people, not Chabad, came out to welcome this great grand rabbi, who was literally an international hero, come to the shores of the U.S. My grandfather was so enamored, he enrolled himself in the Lubavitcher Yeshiva in New York, in Crown Heights, in Brooklyn, and he became a card-carrying Chabad guy, very soon afterwards. Then he was sent to Worcester, Massachusetts, and New Haven, Connecticut, and these types of places to begin to start schools. And then he went to Pittsburgh to help start the school over there. And he was single for these years. And then when he was in Pittsburgh, so the ones that he didn't start the school, but he was one of the first teachers there. So the ones who started the school said, we have a nice young girl who's from McKeesport, which is like a small town outside of Pittsburgh, that you should go and meet, and whatever. They dated, they got married, and then they settled in Pittsburgh, and that's why I grew up in Pittsburgh, just so you know, that's my growth. Back to the story. The previous Rebbe, when he first came to America, he began teaching to the American Jews. He still spoke Yiddish. He didn't start speaking in English. But what he did was he basically set kind of like the marching orders for what's needed, what we need to do. I believe the first discourse, the first mystical text that he authored was on Purim, by Laila Hahu, Tafshin, 1940. Purim. I think the second one was HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem. Might be the third. It's either the second or the third, this discourse that we have. So it really sets forth a lot of the mission statement of what it means to be a Jew in America, what it means to be a Jew. And this was, again, modern America 1940. I know it's 88 years ago. 86. I may have misspoken before. 86 years ago. It's a long time. But a lot of things haven't changed, including the perception that maybe, amongst some, perhaps, that maybe Judaism is a little old-fashioned. Maybe it's a little out of date. Maybe. I'm not saying around the table we feel this, but maybe it's possible to feel that, Judaism, it's a little bit archaic, one might think. Question is, how do we take on the challenge of embracing Yiddishkeit, embracing Judaism, finding the relevance of Judaism, even in a modern society that points us in all sorts of other directions, that leads us around by all sorts of other activities and pursuits, and relegates, religion and or Judaism to something maybe of a little bit of a back burner. And so how is it that we can remain plugged in and steadfastly strong? And that's really the content. That's really the idea of this discourse called Creation and Redemption. So there's going to be a few introductions. One is the historical context of the discourse, which we just did, 1940, New York City, Brooklyn. We did it. Now, the next thing is the opening verse of this discourse. HaChodesh is Alachem, Rosh Chodashim. This month is for you, the first of the months. We'll read it inside soon. But here's what you need to know. Shortly before the Exodus from Egypt, so the verse that's the opening verse of this discourse, and mystical texts, Kabbalistic texts and Chassidic texts always begin with a verse or some sort of teaching, whether it's biblical teaching or Talmudic teaching, and then kind of analyzes it and then jumps into the idea. It's kind of like the way it's discussed is like it's a passport into the conversation. We don't jump right in to the mystical idea, but kind of segue in through the portal of a verse and then a bunch of questions. So the verse that's at the opening of this discourse, which is also timely for literally this week, this coming Shabbat, is HaChodesh, Hazeh Lachem. It goes back to the book of Exodus, which we are concluding this week. It goes back to Egypt, pre-Exodus. It's a few weeks before the Exodus. The Exodus happened on the 15th day of the month of Nisan. A few weeks before that, God tells Moses, HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem, Rishon hu lachem l'chadshesha. HaChodesh Lachem, Rosh Chodashim. This month shall be for you, Rosh Chodashim, the head of the months. What's going on? God is basically giving Moses the mitzvah of the Jewish calendar, Rosh Chodesh. Right? This is before the first day of the month of Nisan. Now we know that the Jewish calendar is the months go by a lunar cycle, which means that as the moon waxes and wanes, that kind of sets the month. So when the moon wanes until it basically disappears from the sky, that is the end of the month. When it begins to wax, meaning when it begins to reemerge in the sky, that's the beginning. That's Rosh Chodesh. So God tells Moses that when the moon is like this, right? HaChodesh Hazeh, when it's like this, That's when Rosh Chodesh is, and this month that's upcoming will be for you the first of the months of the year. We read this portion every year. We pull out a second Torah scroll, even though we won't be up to it in the order of the Torah readings. We pull out a second Torah scroll to read it always the Shabbat before Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the month of Nisan, which will be this coming Shabbat. We'll pull out two Torah scrolls, one that has the regular Torah reading and one that has the HaChodesh reading. And from the HaChodesh reading, we'll read about, a dozen or 24 verses as an add-on for the maftir.
What's the reason for that?
For HaChodesh.
Since we're talking about it, I'm also curious about Parah Adumah, but it's a different story. Like, why do we read Parashat HaChodesh? Like,
You're saying what's the call to? You're saying what's the call to action?
We don't know specific Shabbatot. We have a few that we have. But what's the reason for this one?
Right.
It has to be more than just to remind us about that this is the first.
Saying commemorative. Maybe maybe back in the day it would remind people about the laws, because it continues after that first verse with the laws of the Karban Pesach, the Paschal Lamb. So maybe it was then also
start teaching already.
Maybe make sure that everyone's brushed up on the details of the Paschal Lamb. But the opening is about Rosh Chodesh. Could be. You have to look in the codes. Okay. So, yeah, always. Okay, so that's basically the special reading of this week, and that is what this discourse is based on. And what we're going to see is that in the Jewish calendar, there are two firsts. There's Rosh Hashanah, and then there is the month of Nisan. And these two firsts are 6 months apart. And the question is going to be, we'll see the tension in the opening chapter of our discourse, which we'll start in just a moment. We'll see that there's tension as to which one we call first. If you get a Jewish calendar, the first month that you'll encounter is the month of Tishrei. Every Jewish calendar, the Jewish calendar year begins, what is it, like September-ish, right? Around September time. But the Torah says that this month that's coming up, the month of Nisan, where Passover is in, is the first of the months of the year. It's like, are you sure about that? Because I don't think we do that. So that's going to be part of the tension that we're going to need to explore in this text. Okay, so I passed around the copies. So everyone should have a copy. Let's jump in without further ado. There is another introduction, but we're going to do that introduction as we get a little bit closer. As we get a little bit into the actual learning. Okay, so this is creation and redemption. Hold on 1 second. Get this pulled up here on my side. All right, here we go. Creation and redemption 28. With the assistance of heaven, B'siyata Deshmaya, Shabbat Parashat Tazria, Parashat HaChodesh, 5700, 1940. And the discourse begins with the verse that we've been talking about. This month, meaning the month of Nisan, is for you the first of months. It is for you the first of the months of the year. And that's the quote, and now he begins to ask questions. The second half of the verse, it is for you the first of the months of the year, seems to be a restatement of the first half. This month is for you the first of months. Why does the Torah repeat itself? Does that question make sense? I'm going to read that first verse again. This month is for you the first of months. It is for you the first of the months of the year. Seems to be saying the same thing twice. The first of the months. I got it. We were good the first time. Question number 1. Additionally, why is the verse so verbose? It is for you the first of the months of the year. In other words, why is it that it adds the word lachem? HaChodesh hazeh lachem Rosh Chodeshim. Rishon hu lachem l'chadshei hashana. This month is for you, the first of the months of the year. Why does it have to add the for you? Why is that necessary? That's question number 2. It would have been sufficient had the verse just said it is the first of the months of the year without that additional for you in the Hebrew, lachem. Okay, so what's interesting is that, he asked two questions, but he's not really answering the questions right now, but he's more about to say that the questions themselves indicate that some questions block your way of understanding. Some questions open up a way of understanding. These questions open up a way of understanding. Meaning, if we notice a verse in the Torah that seems to be repeating the same thing twice, then what's the message? What's the takeaway from that?
It's important.
Either it's important to repeat it, or it's not saying the same thing twice. There's two different statements that are being made. And that's the approach that he's going to take. And that's why he says in the next paragraph, from all this it is understood that there are two dynamics here. Meaning, from the question, which puts us into a position where we can't simply say that it's repeating it, it must tell us that there are two different dynamics. Number one, first of months, and number two, months of the year. Let's pause here for a moment so I clarify. Look back at the verse. It says, this month is for you the first of months. And then it says it is for you the first of the months of the year. So there's first of months, and then there's first of the months of the year. Meaning there's months, and then months of the year. And those are two different things. Now, you and I would say, how are those two different things? Seems all the same, but what are we talking about here? We haven't explained it, but he's kind of laying out the structure of the idea. And although this month is for you the first of months, which is the first part of the verse, nevertheless, it is for you the first of the months of the year. In other words, both dynamics are necessary, first of months and months of the year, as we shall explain. And by the way, as we shall explain means all the way at the end of the book. So if you're wondering, if you're thinking you're going to get an answer, you're going to walk out today with an answer to this question, you've already seen the structure of the answer, but the explanation of the answer has not yet been told. But here's the point. In the Hebrew, the verse states, HaChodesh hazeh lachem. Why can't I remember the verse? HaChodesh hazeh lachem Rosh Chadashim. This month is for you, the first of the months, Rosh Chadashim. And then it says, part B, Rishon hu lachem l'chadshei hashana. It's the first for you for the months of the year. Okay, two different things, Rosh Chadashim and Chadshei Chadshei Hashana. Two different things. Months, first of months and months of the year. Two different dynamics. So to explain this, we need to have a new introduction. Dual beginnings. The explanation is as follows. Midrash Rabbah states. Now we have a midrash that we're going to analyze. When God chose his world, he established in it first of months and years. And when he chose Jacob and his sons, he established in it a first month of redemption. So what is the midrash saying? When God created the world, when God chose his world, what does that mean? When God created the world, he established first of months and years. And what is that? The fall, exactly. Tishrei, the month of Tishrei. That's the beginning of the year. The calendar year begins in Tishrei. And that's when the first month of the calendar year is, the way, your typical Jewish calendar. But when God chose Jacob and his sons, he established in it a first month of redemption. What's that referring to? Passover. When did God choose Jacob and his sons? Meaning, when did God choose them to be a nation, an independent nation unto their own? By the way, the first time the Jewish people are called a nation is in Egypt, in the context of the slavery and the Exodus. Until then, they were Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel. Am Yisrael, the nation of Israel, only begins by the Exodus. That's when God creates nationhood, as it were, out of the Jewish people. And so when God chose Jacob and his sons, he established in it a first month of redemption. What's the Chag? What's the month of Geula, of redemption? When is that? That's the month of the Exodus. What month is that? The month of Nisan. So we have here in the Midrash stating we have two beginnings. Yeah.
What does it mean when God chose his world? I mean, God created the world. Isn't it supposed to be when Hakadosh Baruch Hu bara et olamo?
But he created it. So you're asking, why does it say chose instead of create? his world.
What kind of choice? What do you mean choice? He's the creator. He created it. He didn't need to choose it. He created it.
But he created it by choice. Meaning when he chose to create the world.
He had free choice.
Yeah. Creation is not a compulsion. It's not like he had to create. You're still. I'm not necessarily answering the question. Why is choose better than create? To me, choose works because he chose to create and then he created, because the creation was preceded by a choice to do that. But secondarily, then he's able to use the Midrash is able to use the word choose twice, because you wouldn't say create Jacob and his sons.
It's just that when you read the Bible, there is choices that God made. He chose us to be His nation and all that.
That's why I think it uses the word choice.
It says Bereshit bara.
Right.
He used the word creation.
Right. It means but it means he chose to create. He chose that this should be a thing that he's going to invest in. I think it uses choose by creation so that it could use the same word for both beginnings. When he chose the world, he chose one beginning. When he chose Am Yisrael, he chose another beginning.
When you use the word choice, at least to me, it means there are alternatives. Like I know there was other nations that he went with the Torah and asked them, and then he chose us. Like, what does it mean he chose the world? I mean, like other worlds that he didn't want?
He could have
I like this one.
He could have created parallel universes. How Hashem could have chosen not to create. Dinosaurs. Hashem could have chosen not to create. Creation is a choice.
Okay.
By the way, choice implies something very deep. Choice, there's different layers of choice. There are absent-minded choices, and then there are very intentional choices. So to give you an example, if you go into the grocery store and you're buying apples, and they have like 50 apples there, and you need 3. Okay, maybe you're looking a little bit to see, if they're squished or if they have like the brown spots. But at some point, you're just going to grab an apple and go, a few apples and go. Right. You know where we relinquish our choice? This just happened to me. Instacart. Instacart, you relinquish choice. Because someone else is doing the shopping. It's funny because Instacart, I just noticed, they ask you if you buy avocados, ripe, semi-ripe, or not ripe. I'm like, wow, very interesting. Very, very, very professional. Look, choice, there's absent-minded choice, which is like, imagine there were 2 identical apples. How would you make the choice? Even easier. Let's say, I'm going to make it so easy. You're in Costco, which means there's only one ketchup. They don't even have multiple ketchups. But they have next to each other, they have 2 different, they have the same thing twice. Which one do you choose? And is there any significance or depth in that choice? I'm going to vote no. There is no depth or significance. It's a random choice. So there's things what we would call random choice. And then there are choices that are a little bit more intentional. Meaning, what color am I going to paint my picket fence? Am I going to go white? Am I going to go, what other colors are, maybe there's only one color that people do. Brown. Okay, brown. I might go brown. Blue, does anyone do blue picket fence? No, that's not a thing. No. All right. But conceptually, right, there's a choice of what color am I going to paint my picket fence. Okay. That's a choice. So at least now there's a choice between 2 different things. Before it was the same thing. That's not even a choice. That's like random. Then I have a choice between like, what color do I like? Or vanilla or chocolate or, I don't know, the chicken or the steak. I mean, whatever, right? Fish, vegetarian, chicken at a dinner. You could, yeah.
It's kind of like Pesach, where you only have certain items you can choose from.
Right.
And they don't make other
alternatives. Yeah. So if you want your Pesach mayo, you're pretty much stuck with whatever Geffen, whatever company has decided to produce. Exactly. So there's sometimes that you have, it's identical. You just literally choose something. It's not really a choice. Other times you actually have a choice, but it's, how deep is that choice? I mean, you're making a choice, but how deep is the choice? Sometimes you can't make a choice. Sometimes in your own heart and psyche, you can't even figure out what choice to make. There's two different options, and you revert to what I'd like to call the mental coin flip, right? Where you just like flip a coin. And you're like, all right, heads or tails? Like, what are we doing? It's like you could easily take one of two paths, and they're different paths, and each one has pros and cons, and there's nothing overwhelming about one or the other, and so you kind of flip a coin and you say, all right, let's go that way. But again, how much are you involved in that choice? You've almost relegated your choice to this, whether it's a literal coin or a figurative coin, you're surrendering your choice on some level. The real definition of choice is really where there's no choice. And I know that sounds completely crazy, but hear me out for a second. The real choice is where you have two different things, but for you, it's like obvious that this is the choice. It's like, of course, like this is so me, of course I'm going to choose this. That actually is the greatest form of choice because you had an alternative, but this is so you. It's an expression of your choice. It's not a surrender of your choice to a coin toss. It's not a superficial. It's a deep assertion of your choice, what you want. That's the true definition of choice. Meaning on the deepest of levels, choice is not really. You couldn't really have chosen the other choice. Even though there was another opportunity, you couldn't have chosen it because it's not authentically you. Does that make sense? On the deepest level, free choice means when you assert your most authentic self, and at that level, there really isn't another viable choice. But there is conceptual choice, but it's not really a viable choice. So to me, that's what it means. It's like when God chose the world. He could have not created, he could have created something else, he created this. That's if we look at it as a superficial choice. If we look at it as a deep choice, it means this is what he really wanted. He chose to assert and to express his truest, deepest desire for what he wanted, which is to create. And the same thing is true with Bachar B'Yakov Ubanav. Choosing the Jewish people. Same thing. Right? You said he offered the Torah to others. Was he really banking on that happening? I mean, like, was that real? Like, there was a plan. I mean, imagine that. Imagine like Abraham, God speaks to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And then right last minute says, hey, y'all, do you want it? Sure. This guy's sorry. It's been a few hundred years. We've been through a lot together. Slavery and freedom. But someone else made the call for the Torah. We're pivoting. That was never going to happen. So what's the choice? The choice is because conceptually, theoretically, there's other options, but it's really the deepest choice. On the deepest level of choice, there's really no choice. It's like the choice to live. The choice to pick up your kid from preschool and not someone else's kid. There's not much of a choice there, right? It's your kid. Of course you pick up your kid, right?
Tough choice.
Tough choice, right? Yeah. I always used to say when my kids were around, all right, first 3 kids in. Let's go. Into the car. Gotta go. Gotta run. That's it. Doesn't matter. But obviously, it does matter. So maybe that's a little bit about choice. On the deepest level, there's really no choice, even though it's choice, but you couldn't have really chosen any other way. So now, let's get back inside. So the Medrash says that there's 2 beginnings. There's the beginning of creation, and there's the beginning vis-a-vis creation, and the beginning vis-a-vis redemption. So he continues. This bottom paragraph of page 28. This then is the explanation of our verse. This month is for you the first of months. It is for you the first of the months of the year. Page 30. Months of the year refer to when God chose his world, meaning creation. This month is for you the first of months refers to when God chose Jacob and his sons and established for them a month of redemption, the month of Nisan. So basically, the verse talks about 2 beginnings. It says, HaChodesh Zalachem Rosh Chodashim. This month is for you the first of months. That means redemption. Rishon Hu Lachem L'Chatshei Shana. It's the first for you of the months of the year. Months of the year is referring to Tishrei. Now you're probably wondering, well, how could this one month be both the beginning of redemption and creation. If it's not the beginning of creation, we'll talk about that. This, however, needs to be understood. For our sages said, on Rosh Hashanah, slave labor ceased from our forefathers, which seems to imply that the beginning of the redemption in Egypt took place on Rosh Hashanah. Why then is it Nisan that is referred to as the month God established when he chose Jacob and his sons as the month of redemption? So this is another question, which the question is, if the slavery ceased on Rosh Hashanah, and I'll explain what that means in a second, then why did we establish the month of redemption, the month of Nisan, when the Exodus actually happened? What that means to say is that 6 months before the Exodus, Egypt was powerless to continue enslaving the Jewish people because of the plagues. Did you guys know this? Have you ever heard that before? This is footnote 7. Footnote 7 is coming from the Talmud, Rosh Hashanah 11a. The Talmud says, on Rosh Hashanah, slave labor ceased from our forefathers. Again, the Exodus happens the 15th day of Nisan. 6 months prior, Rosh Hashanah, the 1st of Tishrei, again, it's 6 months and 2 weeks prior, slavery was effectively over for the Jewish people. Egypt was not strong enough to enslave or to enforce slavery upon the Jewish people. They were basically free. Still in Egypt, but free. So the question is, why don't we celebrate that as the month of freedom? Why do we wait to the month of Nisan when we actually physically walked out of Egypt? Why not celebrate that in the month of Tishrei? Now, before we continue, I want to do our third introduction. I promised you a third introduction, so here we go. Our third introduction is going to take us into the Talmud, Tractate Rosh Hashanah. So I'm going to pull up a trusty Rosh Hashanah 11a. Actually, start with 10b. Rosh Hashanah 10b. Now, the way I'm doing this is I have a computer with the internet. Can you imagine? And I typed in Rosh Hashanah 10b because that's the page that it begins on. And up comes, as one of the results, Sepharia. And Sepharia is marvelous because it gives you whatever you need as far as Jewish text. So here we go. So I'm going to read this. You don't have this, but don't worry. I'm not making this up. There's a dispute between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua about some very famous biblical episodes as to when they occurred. So sit down, relax, and enjoy. Rabbi Eliezer said, in Tishrei, the world was created. In Tishrei, the patriarchs were born. In Tishrei, the patriarchs died. On Passover, Isaac was born. On Rosh Hashanah, Sarah, Rachel, and Hannah were remembered by God and conceived. On Rosh Hashanah, Joseph came out of prison. On Rosh Hashanah, we just read this, our forefathers' slavery in Egypt ceased. In Nisan, the Jewish people were redeemed from Egypt. And in Tishrei, the future redemption will occur with the coming of the Messiah. You with me? There's a lot of details there. We'll run through again very quickly. In Tishrei, the world was created. Patriarchs were born. Patriarchs died. On Passover, Isaac was born. On Rosh Hashanah, Sarah, Rachel, and Hannah were remembered by God and conceived. Rosh Hashanah, Joseph came out of prison. Rosh Hashanah, forefather slavery in Egypt ceased. In Nisan, Jewish people were redeemed from Egypt. And in Tishrei, the future redemption will occur. So he says 7 things for Tishrei and 2 things for Nisan. Yeah.
So I'm confused because so Tishrei is like the civil first of the month, and like Nisan is like biblically said to be the first of the months.
Correct.
So where are we bringing in, like, because the verse is talking about Nisan, right? So
correct.
Where are we bringing in Tishrei here?
Why is the first of the months of the year Tishrei?
Well, I kind of know why that is, but it's like why, man, we're kind of doing like
why is Tishrei coming in?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's hard. It's going to be hard for me to give the answer now without going through the entire book. Okay. Meaning, you're asking a very good question. Okay. But that's really the entire arc of the narrative, is to explain what that means. Okay. All right. Next, that's one opinion. Yeah.
I'm just looking at footnote 6. The first thing that it says that is that the Jewish people will be redeemed in Messianic area in Nisan, not in Tishrei.
One second. Comes along Rabbi Yeshua and disagrees. That was only one opinion. It's one opinion. Rabbi Yeshua disagrees, and he says the following. In Nisan, the world was created. In Nisan, the patriarchs were born. In Nisan, the patriarchs died. On Passover, Isaac was born. On Rosh Hashanah, Sarah, Rachel, and Hannah were remembered by God and conceived. On Rosh Hashanah, Joseph came out of prison. On Rosh Hashanah, our forefathers' slavery in Egypt ceased. In Nisan, the Jewish people were redeemed from Egypt. And in Nisan, in the future, the Jewish people were redeemed in the final redemption. They all talk about 9 things. But for Rabbi Eliezer, 7 happened in Tishrei and 2 in Nisan. For Rabbi Yeshua, 3 in Tishrei, 6 in Nisan. I hope they kept track of their dispute because there's a lot of details over there.
Which is the one they don't agree on?
Say that again?
Basically all of them.
Because one is like, which one is the one that they don't agree?
Which one did they flip?
Yes,
Because one is 2 and 7 versus 6 and 3?
Yeah.
I don't even know. I have to run this through AI to say, okay, figure this out for me. Draw me a chart. So actually what I did was, funnily enough, I have a little handout here for everybody today. I'm prepared. I try to be prepared a little bit. Once in a while. Take a look at this. Let's go through this together. Yeah, please take a pass. Thank you very much. Okay, let's go through this. Oh, I think I closed this document. I have to pull it open again for our online crew.
Thank you.
Here we go. Thank you very much. Okay, here we go. I'm going to share my screen as well. We'll go through this together. And stick with me, please. Stick with me, please. All right, here we go. Important dates in Jewish history. Oh, no, it's questions that I put. Ay vey. According to Rabbi Eliezer, how many of the events mentioned in the Talmud happened in Tishrei? And how many in Nisan? According to Rabbi Eliezer, what's the answer? You already know the answer. 6 happened in Tishrei. 7 happened in Tishrei. And 2 happened in Nisan. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
No?
Yeah.
Yes. What are they? We'll leave that aside for right now. According to Rabbi Yeshua, how many of the events mentioned in the Talmud happened in Tishrei and how many in Nisan? So 3 in Tishrei and 6 in Nisan. What are they? Again, we'll leave that aside. Now, underneath that, below that, we have the Jewish months. And as you'll notice, I ordered them. Yeah, I just put them in just which one is one, which one is number 1. And it depends on who you ask, because as you might recall, there is a little bit of a debate about this. Because the question is, when was the world created? Right? Rabbi Eliezer, who's the first opinion, says the world was created in Tishrei. So that's the left column. Right? When is the world created? Tishrei. And then Cheshvan, Kislev, Tevet, Shvat, Adar, Nisan would be month number 7. Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, Avel. Rabbi Yeshua says, no, the world is created in Nisan. That means that Rosh Hashanah should be the month of Nisan. Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, Avel, Tishrei, Cheshvan, Kislev, Tevet, Shvat, Adar. Now, who do we hold like? When do we celebrate Rosh Hashanah? Like Rabbi Eliezer or like Rabbi Yeshua? Like Rabbi Eliezer. Okay? But we pick and choose. Because we also say that the redemption is going to happen in the month of Nisan, which is like Rabbi Yeshua. Although Rabbi Eliezer said the world was created in Tishrei and the redemption is going to happen in Tishrei. We'll take it when it comes. Trust me. Whenever it happens, we're like, yes. Yes, we're all in. You hear that, Tucker? We're all in on this stuff, right? Whenever it happens, we're in. But the point is that there is a machloket, there is a dispute over here as far as when the world was created and what is month number 1. So ultimately, the consensus is like this. You want to know what the bottom line consensus is? We kind of make everyone happy. And it's not just us. It's the Torah that makes everyone happy, sort of. Basically, our calendar year follows the left column. Tishrei, 5786 began the first day of Tishrei. Tishrei, Cheshvan is month 2, Kislev is month. We are now in Adar, the 19th day of Adar. We are in month number 6 from the new calendar year. However, in biblical language, when the Torah refers to month number 1, month number 2, month number 3, it uses the right column. It uses the right column. Nisan is in the Torah, post-Exodus. Whenever the Torah says, in the first month of the year, it's always Nisan. Or it refers to Rosh Hashanah as the first day of the 7th month of the year, it's Rosh Hashanah. 7th month of the year is Rosh Hashanah. That makes no sense. It's the 7th month of the year and it's a new year. Welcome to how this works. So there's 2 firsts, yeah.
It's interesting, when we were kids and we were writing the dates, we always write the Hebrew date, the name of the month. And in the secular, we would write 1, 2, 3, January, February. Never wrote January, February. So I guess they made some compromise, like we're not going to decide which one is 2. We always want to write the name of the month. So it's like Yuzayin, Betishrei, Tavshin.
Because you never do the abbreviation like 1-1-21, right?
And there's another thing, like,
because it would be too complicated. Because which one is what? Leave it up to a Jewish calendar to make this complicated. You thought it was already complicated. Now we don't even know which. Again, if you're ever studying the Torah, and the Torah is telling you about a holiday that occurs in month 1 and month 7, do not consult. It's not the Dressler's funeral home calendar, Jewish calendar, or the Publix calendar available at your fine local supermarket. That's not that. That's not month number 1. Month number 1 does not mean Tishrei. Month number 1 always means Nisan. In the Torah, it always means Nisan. Month 7 is Tishrei, like that right column. Yeah.
And so I was going to say, to your point, Rosh Hashanah in the Tanakh isn't said to be like the first of the year. It's like, isn't supposed to be like blowing of the horns or something like that? Like, even
doesn't even call the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
It says, I forget the language, but a few times it talks about Rosh Hashanah as a holiday.
Right.
And it talks about, Yom Teruah,
Yeah.
Zikron Teruah, day of the shofar sounding.
Right.
Yeah. And it's the first day of the 7th month. Mikra Kodesh, it's a holy assembly, it's a holiday, holy convocation. Blow the shofar. Done. We call it Rosh Hashanah because we follow the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer in the Talmud that says the world was created then. But it's interesting. It's month number 7.
Are there in Israel calendar that start with Nisan?
No.
Always starts with Tishrei.
Oh, yeah.
No.
There's no opinion that says the calendar year starts from Nisan. But there's the year of, and this is literally the title of the book. I actually gave it this title: Creation and Redemption. When does the year of creation begin? Tishrei. When does the year of redemption begin? Geula, Nisan. Two beginnings. Okay. And by the way, the Torah says, for the purposes of Torah conversation, the first month will always be the month of redemption. We're going on a higher level.
What on the different, maybe it's on a different note, but why wasn't the names of the months ever named
in Torah and biblical? It's a very good question. I don't know. Or to answer your question, add on another question: when's the first time we see the names of the months? Already in the Talmud. Already.
It's not Hebrew.
I don't know.
None of those words make sense.
Have you never used the word Tishrei in a sentence?
I'll Tishrei you later.
I'll accept your Tishrei and raise you a Tishrei. I don't know. I don't play that. All right, good. Let's jump back into our text and we'll do a little bit more. All right, remember, the opening chapter is always the passport. All right, always getting in with some questions, a bunch of questions, and then we get to the meat and potatoes as we delve past that kind of opening. All right, so 1 second. Here we go. Let me try this again. Need to share my screen properly. Here we go. All right. Let's do this. Nisan and Tishrei. Right, that's we're up to, page 30, middle of the page. Nisan and Tishrei are referred to in the Torah as first and seventh. That's respectively. Right, Nisan is first and Tishrei is seventh. It literally says it here. Nisan is called first and Tishrei is seventh. The redemption from Egypt, which was the first redemption, meaning of the story of our people, was the first time we experienced Geula redemption, took place in Nisan. However, with regard to the last redemption, meaning the final redemption, which will commence with the coming of Mashiach, speed in our days, Amen, the Talmud records, as we studied a moment ago, a dispute between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. And you already are experts in this. You know what they're going to say. Rabbi Eliezer maintains that our forefathers were redeemed in Nisan, and in the future we will be redeemed in Tishrei, page 32. Rabbi Yeshua, on the other hand, maintains that our forefathers were redeemed in Nisan, and in the future we will be redeemed in Nisan. All right, this requires clarification. What exactly is at the root of their argument regarding the time of the future redemption, which will take place in our days, Amen, whether it will be in Nisan or Tishrei? Meaning, what's the basis of the argument? Was one rabbi Tishrei-centric and the other one Nisan-centric? Was one born, that's not Nisan-centra, I said Nisan-centric, just to clarify, right? Was it simply that one rabbi had a bias for 1 month over the other? Was it maybe that was their birthday, his birthday was then? Like, what's going on? What's the basis of that dispute? Meaning, if the rabbis are disagreeing, it has to be based on something. Let's continue. In addition, why is it that the Midrash Rabbah cites with the view of Rabbi Yeshua that our forefathers were redeemed in Nisan, and in the future we will be redeemed in Nisan as well? As I said before, we ultimately split the baby.
Difference.
Who uses that expression? We split, it's King Solomon. We split the difference, right? We go with Rabbi Eliezer with regards to creation. We say that, the world is created in Tishrei, and so that's Rosh Hashanah. But we go with Rabbi Yeshua on when Mashiach is going to come. Again, we'll take Mashiach whenever it happens. We are waiting for a better world and a healed planet. But we do say that it's a Nisan energy. Okay, so that's Rabbi Yeshua. So that's why. So the question is, why do we side with Rabbi Yeshua on that? All right, let's continue. You ready for another verse? This verse is from the book of Kings. In connection with the dedication of the first temple, the verse states, and you'll see why this is relevant in a second. All Israel assembled before King Solomon in the month of Etanim, which is the 7th month, for the holiday of Sukkot. So again, in the book of Kings, it refers to the holiday of Sukkot, which is the 15th day of Tishrei, as which month? Which number month? Number 7. Now that makes sense because, again, we're counting, in biblical language, in Tanakh, we always count Nisan as number 1, and so Tishrei is number 7. All that is fine. But what does it mean, B'chodesh ha'etanim, in the month of Etanim? Targum Yonatan interprets the verse as follows. All Israel assembled before King Solomon in the month that the ancient ones, Etan can mean ancient, old, right? Is the month that the ancient ones used to call the first month, and which is now the 7th month for the holiday of Sukkot. In other words, ancient ones prior to the giving of the Torah called Tishrei the first month. Now we're getting a little clarity. It used to be that month number 1, not only the calendar year, but the month that we called 1 was Tishrei, because that's when creation happened. That's the first number of month. That's the calendar year. It was month number 1. But after, post-Sinai, post-Exodus and Sinai, we call Nisan number 1. For as the Midrash says, the world was created on the 25th of Elul. And again, that was the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. The month of Tishrei is therefore the first month for years. As it says, and they, the heavenly host, shall be as signs and testaments for days and for years. And the first of Tishrei is Rosh Hashanah, because again, it's all about creation. Let's keep on going. Page 34. Our sages thus said, in accordance with which view do we now pray on Rosh Hashanah with the words, this is the day, the beginning of your creation, in remembrance of the first day. Meaning, when we pray on Rosh Hashanah, not just blow the shofar. The Torah says clearly to blow the shofar. We say, Hayom, what is the Hebrew? Across from 34. What does it say? Zeh hayom tchilat ma'asecha zikaron liyom rishon. Right? Why do we pray? This is the day, the beginning of creation, remembrance of the first day. Whose opinion is that? In other words, Rosh Hashanah, which takes place in the first of Tishrei, is the beginning of your creation each year, since it is remembrance of the first day that creation was completed. with the creation of Adam. That is in accordance with which view was his prayer composed, with the view of Rabbi Eliezer, who maintains that the world was created on the 25th of El, as we said before in the Talmud. Again, nothing new here so far. And which is now the 7th month after the Exodus. And the giving of the Torah, Tishrei is the 7th month, and Nisan is the 1st month. And so he asked the question, but if Tishrei was originally called the 1st, what changed that caused Nisan to be called the 1st? And if the cause is the redemption that took place in Nisan, that itself requires explanation. Why did the redemption take place in Nisan? The beginning of the redemption took place in Tishrei, as it was on Rosh Hashanah, which is in Tishrei, that slave labor ceased from our forefathers. So why did the complete redemption take place in Nisan? Understand the questions? So many questions. I distilled it on the sheet into 7 questions. And you're like, 7 questions? It all sounds like one question blob, maybe. 7 questions. Okay, 7 questions on the sheet. Let me pull up the sheet again. You guys see it? Opening questions? I worked hard, so you have to work less hard. That's my motto. It's my motto for today. I put in the work, so you have to put in a little less work. Okay, you ready? Opening questions. Question number 1. Why does the verse say this month is for you the first of months, and then repeat, it is for you the first of the months of the year? It sounds repetitive. Now, we already answered it's not, but at first blush, it does sound repetitive. Why does the verse add in the words for you? It is for you the first of the months of the year. Why for you? Number 3, if according to the Talmud, Egyptian slavery ceased in Tishrei, why is Nisan the month of redemption? Number 4, what is at the core of the debate regarding in which month the future redemption will take place, Tishrei or Nisan? Number 5, why does the Midrash side with the opinion that the future redemption will take place in Nisan? Number 6, since Tishrei was originally the 1st month, why is it now the 7th? Number 7, being that the start of Egyptian freedom occurred in Tishrei, why did the complete redemption take place in Nisan? Why not just Tishrei it out and then keep it the 1st month? Meaning, and it's not as simple, numbers, 1 and 7. It's a deep question. If God chose, gets back to choice. You ready for a little depth in the question? If God chose the month of Tishrei to create the world, then that means there's something special about that time. So why didn't God, and then God chose that, Rosh Hashanah, Tishrei, to be the time when slavery ceased. So then why didn't God choose that same energy of time to be the actual redemption and the exodus from Egypt? Why does God shift it out 6 months later to month number 7, which then becomes number 1, and then throws us off and drives us Meshuggah? It's crazy. Yeah.
Did it have anything to do with Tishrei was for the whole world, but this is just for the...
There is an implication in that Tishrei is universal, and Nisan is the beginning.
Keep it separate.
But the question is, so you're saying maybe it's neat to keep it 6 months apart. Good, I hear that. But couldn't you roll it into, it's going to be along the lines, I mean, the angle we're going to go with here, I like what you're saying, but the angle that he goes with is a little bit different, slightly different. It's that there's 2 different energies and you can't mix the 2. One is an energy of creation and one is an energy of redemption. Meaning, in other words, one is nature and one is supernatural. And near the twine shall meet, or something like that, right? You can't mix them. So you're going universal, particular. That's an interesting angle. He goes natural and supernatural. The genesis of nature is Tishrei. The genesis of miracles and supernatural and redemption and exodus and play and all that stuff, the redemption, that's a separate, it's another time span. And to differentiate it, it's literally the opposite side of the calendar, 6 months later, month number 7, which then becomes month number 1, because as we'll see, we're meant to be living a little bit of a supernatural life. We're not meant to get stuck in America. We're not meant to get stuck into the whole lunch at 12 o'clock and an American chocolatinics, that's what they used to call them, Americans who are obsessed with chocolate. The old country used to refer to the Americans as, see, right? But we're meant to have a little bit of supernatural energy into our everyday lives. And again, I'm giving a little bit of the scope of the entire discourse, but I think it's important to recognize kind of where we're headed with all of this.
I agree.
So,
it makes sense,
to keep it separate.
Yeah, where you were saying it's a time and energy thing. Like if you think about it, as far as the months and what they mean astrologically and energy wise, like it kind of makes sense because when March you get kind of like the Aries warriors, like the first. Then around in Nissan, that's like the Lunar New Year most of the time. So a lot of things kind of make sense for that to be sort of like a new beginning
New
of
beginnings.
from the months and stuff like that.
Yeah. So to recap, what do we do today? We did a lot today, and it's trying to let's land the plane. What we did was, number one, I introduced the context of this discourse, 1940, the launch of Chabad in America, and really the previous Rebbe's vision that America is not different, meaning that even in America, a land of freedom, you don't have to throw away your tefillin. You can be a proud Jew. You can be an educated Jew. You can study. You can send your kids to a Jewish day school in America, not just when you were in a shtetl and you couldn't even join the regular culture if you wanted to. Here you can. You can still choose to send your kid to a Jewish school. That's the theme. It's like addressing the American Jewry, and to inspire American Jewry to choose Judaism not out of force but out of choice. That's a huge deal, by the way. It's not that we're forced into Judaism because no one else wants you. No, you can choose whatever you want and you still choose Judaism. That's huge. Reminds me of a cynical joke that I heard recently. Somebody told me, I don't know if it's a joke. Two anti-Semites got together and met. And they were rulers in their lands, whatever it was, and they wanted to get rid of the Jews. They were discussing what's the best way to get rid of the Jews. So one said, I have an idea. I'm going to force them. I'm going to make a rule that they can't be Jewish anymore. And the other one said, you know what? I'm going to make a rule that they could do whatever they want. And they met 10 years later. And the one that made the rule that you can't be Jewish anymore, he says it backfired. They're more proudly Jewish than ever before. I told them they can't be Jewish. Now they're like, I'll show you. And the one that said, I told them that they have all the freedoms, whatever they want, they're a little less Jewish today.
Jews never get it all together, do they?
It's the, you know what they called it, the Velvet Holocaust, right? America, where it's nice and easy and smooth and you do whatever you want. That's what the previous Rebbe was trying to push back against. How to make Judaism compelling, not only when you're forced to do it, but because from the inside. So that's the overall context. Specifically, we got into a verse that pertains to this upcoming Shabbat, which is Shabbat Parshat HaChodesh, where it talks about Rosh Chodesh, and it talks about this month of Nisan is the first month. It's the first of the months of the year. We said, what's going on? It's repetitive. We asked 7 questions, but what emerges from this, and I think the launching point for our upcoming sessions next week and beyond is as follows, that what we see in this verse, due to its repetition, is that there are 2 beginnings. There are 2 firsts. There's the first month for creation, Tishrei, and there's the first month of redemption, which is Nisan. And there's 2 separate firsts. They're not the same thing. One is an energy of nature, one is an energy of miracles. And now that we have that clarified, okay, what do we do next with it? Well, we'll see what happens. But what we did in the context of that is we read a piece from Talmud. We asked a bunch of questions. We showed a bunch of differences, different opinion about what happened when. And again, we concluded with the idea of 2 beginnings. All right, so what's the takeaway? Let's do a very quick takeaway today. In our lives, we have moments of nature and moments of miracles, moments of ordinary and moments of extraordinary. Moments of ordinary life where things are just moving as usual. And then we have a simcha, a celebration, a holiday, a special time. We get very inspired. The key is to somehow try to fuse the 2, to recognize that they're both separate spaces, right? Nature and the supernatural, ordinary and extraordinary, but to somehow try to fuse the 2 together and make the ordinary extraordinary as well. And so every day we have the opportunity as we wake up in the morning to daven, to pray a little bit, and to add a little bit of extraordinary connection with the divine into our lives and make our days extraordinary. May we do so. And I'll see you back next week for part 2 of Creation and Redemption. Thank you for joining. Hope you enjoyed it. I do need to mention, I don't have the flyer here. I didn't bring it to this room. We are starting a brand new course called Curious Tales of the Talmud, starting this Wednesday, daytime and evening. Some of the greatest, wildest, most bizarre stories ever taught in the Talmud and their deeper mystical symbolisms and personal takeaways that is coming up this Wednesday. Please join us. You are going to love it. All right.
Will you send an email
Are we allowed to keep these?
for when?
Yes.
The times.
Sure. It's 12 noon and 7:30 p.m., but I'll send an email. Yeah.
Are we allowed to keep these?
Sure. Yeah. All right, good. Any questions, comments? Made sense?
Thank you.
Good. Frank, great to see you. Awesome. Good to see you. Dr.
Always
Maxley,
good
good
to
to see you. Jacqueline, good to see you. Ellen, good to see you guys. All right. Take care. Shavua tov, everybody.